Okay.
And so built a mud hut, and that's what we lived in and learned our first language out in the middle of the bush, literally, in northwestern Kenya. The milk was soured. It was called Merseek, and so you had, it tastes really very much to me like you're having milk and an Oreo cookie. You had the sour milk and the corn mush called ugali together.
I'll stick with the Oreo.
Really? Can't convince you to go otherwise. Termites also, those were a real delicacy.
I've heard that before.
Yes.
How do you prepare a termite? You just eat it live?
Some people would. We prefer.
Hey, today we've got a great conversation with a new friend of mine who we've lived in kind of similar circles and come from similar places for many, many years. And I've heard about Good News Productions for many years. I just didn't always know what they did. Well, now I do, and I don't think you're ever going to forget it. They actually make films to teach people the gospel in their language in ways that would minister to them in ways that we could never do on our own. You're going to love his story. You're going to love to hear about how this individual was transformed by the grace of God, and God even cured his stuttering so he could preach the gospel. Today, you get to hear from Mike Schrage, who is the president of Good News Productions International. Mike's an incredible guy. You're not going to forget him, and I think you're going to love to be partnered with what it is they're doing. Well, as always, we're only here because of our sponsors, and Mike's going to be sponsoring us now for a few weeks to help us do what we do so he can get the message out about what he does as well at GNPI.org. I also want to extend a special invitation to anybody interested in going to walk the footsteps of Paul on his second missionary journey. It involves walking, taking bus rides, and on a little cruise as well around the Mediterranean rim. You're not going to want to miss this. If you're interested in going with my wife and I and several others as we take that journey, you can text the word Greece, GREECE, to 55757 to find out more. We'd love to have you join us as we combine church world and podcast world as we head over to travel the steps of Paul. It's going to put the Bible in a light we've never seen before. It's going to change your life. Go to texting the word Greece on your phone to 55757. Okay, here's my conversation with Mike Schrage. Mike, it is so good to have you with us. I want to start off with a question that I think you can answer that's going to be a bit of a hot take for us to kick off our conversation. How many people in the world right now do not know Jesus and face the possibility of eternal separation from God?
Yeah. Thanks for the question. The best that I have been able to tell, it's around 6 billion. That's with a B.
Wow.
So there's 8 billion in the world, and they say roughly a quarter of them, 2 billion, know Jesus in the largest sense of that word. So 3/4 do not.
Wow. Now, that seems like a small number because you think, well, everybody I know says they're a Christian, but there's a difference.
Yep.
How would you define that?
Yeah. Well, in terms of theologically, of course, just saying you know of Jesus is a lot different than knowing who he is and having a relationship with him.
Right.
But when we're in the U.S., there's a church on every corner.
Right.
There's a way to access Christian resources all over the place. But when I travel all over the world, there are tons of places, Rusty, where there is no church, where lots of people live that have never rubbed shoulders with a Christian and never even heard the name Jesus.
Did you know that there's more than 6 billion people who do not know Jesus, don't have a relationship with him? 3 billion that don't even know his name, haven't even heard of him. Good News Productions International is working to solve that problem. GNPI has been working for decades now to help use media to help people come to know and find and follow Jesus. You can check out more from GNPI.org, but you can also go and be a part of their bold initiative to share the gospel over 1 billion times in the next few years. Check out mission15.global or go to GNPI.org. I'm going to ask you to sign up through mission15.global and pledge $15 a month. That's like a latte or two in order to help people come to know Jesus globally. The work they do is incredible, and you're going to want to hear all about it on our podcast with Mike Schrage. So check that out, and check out GNPI and the work they're doing, mission15.global, and be a part of it today. Okay, so that sets us up for what we want to talk about today.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of where you came from and how you got into what you're doing, and then we'll get into what you're doing now.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in a commonly known Catholic, nominally religious background. I was the large family.
Okay.
I was the first of 9.
Oh, my goodness.
And my dad was a farmer. And I was hoping to go on to be a veterinarian. So the plan was for me to be a vet and then to slowly work into farming with my father. When I was a junior in college, I met Jesus and became a Christian, and everything changed. I stopped the pursuit of farming and pursuit of being a vet and said, I really need to learn more from life on life with someone who's a Christian. So I interviewed for a gentleman who was a Christian farmer in Nevada, Missouri. His name was Everett Fortner, and he was a deacon in the Christian churches. I knew nothing about churches. I didn't know anything about the Restoration movement per se. And so this man just took me under the wing, hired me, and mentored and discipled me. And It was there that I really started to grow in my faith as a follower of Jesus.
Okay, so let me go back to you're in college.
Yeah.
And that's where you came to Christ,
I
right?
did.
So growing up nominally religious, this kind of makes sense for what we were just talking about, the 2 billion versus the 4 billion that don't know Jesus. So, or 6 million, I guess. So with that in mind, you kind of understand being Christian in name only, or Christian on Christmas and Easter and all of that. So what happened in your life that made you go, nope, that's not enough, something's missing, and thus you decided to become a Christian?
Yeah. I was, as a junior, lacking direction in my life. I was just having one more year to go, and I was going to be a graduating college kid, and I really didn't know what was it all about. What was the purpose? I'd had a friend killed tragically in a car accident, and I really started to go back to the Catholic Church, and it felt so empty. And someone gave me in my dorm room a Bible the year before, and my mother had also put a New Testament in my suitcase after getting back from Thanksgiving one year, doing my laundry, and smuggled in a New Testament. And I just started reading the Gospel of John. I was reading this New Testament that my mom had put in my suitcase that I mentioned, and I went, wow, that's really odd. Now, mind you, this is a kid from the middle part of the U.S., the Bible Belt, right? And I went, so there's these names of 4 men, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and those are titles of chapters, I guess. And then they move into these Romans and Acts. What's Acts? And all these things didn't make sense to me. Right. Anyway, I just started I just started reading the Gospel of John. And in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And I wept. At the end of my bed that night, I was working at a research station in school. And I said, God, if you can take and give this directionless guy any purpose, I'm all in. I will do what you tell me to do. I will go anywhere you tell me to go. You've got me, hook, line, and sinker.
Wow.
And so that was my conversion experience, and it was more to it later on. But yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's obvious why you're so passionate about what it is you do now. This was a radical transformation post-18, which most people that come to Christ usually do before 18. But this was a little bit later on in your journey. And so your journey then continues where you decide, I got to go get some biblical education.
Yep.
You go to my alma mater. You're now alma mater of Ozark Christian College. At the time, it probably was Ozark Bible College,
That's right.
I think.
That's right.
And sat under some great teaching. And somewhere along the line, you caught this bug or whatever it is that says, I need to do more than just know about the Bible and share the Bible. I need to go overseas to do that. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I heard people speak in their chapels and in our classes and our dorm devotions, men like Zaiden Nutt, K. Watt Mole, Dr. Garland Bear. I had never heard of what missionaries are, much less what they do. I never met one. But there I was, a little bit older college student, and thought to myself, for the years that I worked with this farmer, how we took care of pigs, because we exported pig genetics all over the world. Matter of fact, we were in the Guinness World Book of Records. We sold one pig to the Japanese for $37,000, and I'm going, I could take care of pigs better than people were being taken care of, even physically, much less spiritually.
Right.
And so that convicted me when I heard these missionaries say, we need to go. And I'm going, I don't know that I'm really that great a preacher, but I can really care for people. I can feed people. I can help people. And maybe through that caring and helping, I can have the opportunity to share about Jesus. And so it really came from more of a Peace Corps mentality at first that I was going to go. Yeah. But the more and more I started learning at the college about the scriptures and about Jesus' mandate to go into all the world and to be an ambassador and to be a herald and one who takes the good news, I said, I think I can do that. I can not only help people with my hands, when the opportunity presents itself, could share with my mouth as well who Jesus is.
Wow, that's incredible. Okay, so I want to drill down on that, because we were talking before we officially came on the air about, the ability to communicate, because you told me that for the larger part of your life, you stuttered and were unable to speak. And so that idea probably seemed foreign to you. Tell us about how that kind of transformed.
Oh, it was very scary. Yeah, as I said, in high school, stuttered, very nervous in front of crowds. I had, as I told you, one line in the school play, forgot it because of being so nervous. And today I've had opportunities to speak to crowds of 10, 20,000. Traveled all over the world speaking and preaching, and God has a sense of humor, I guess, and just wanted this old vessel to really magnify the goodness of God, and saying, I can clean up and take care of any problem you have, Mike, if you're willing to, as you say, do anything I want you to do and go anywhere you want me to go.
So was that a one day you wake up and you no longer stutter, or was that a lot of training, or how'd that work?
No, it just kind of just went away on its own. It's one of those things where, like we have a pain or something and you go, oh, today, and then the next day it's not quite so bad, and the next day you realize, it's all gone. Yeah. And that was sort of it. It was just a gradual, all of a sudden one day I'm going, I don't stutter anymore. Yeah.
I love that, because the miracles that get constantly talked about are the ones of in an instant, this went away, or those kind of things. But you see a lot of Jesus healings are kind of go show yourself to the priest, and it happens along the way. Go fill these 6 jars of water. It happens along the way. And in your situation, it's a bit of a process, but I think those are the times we think, oh well, that just so happened, but God was in even that.
Totally. Absolutely.
Okay, so you go off to Kenya. Tell us about your experience over there, because that, in a lot of people's minds, just seems like I can't even wrap my mind around what that would be like.
Yeah, I guess backing up, mission trips are a very common thing today. I'm old enough I was pre-mission trip, so my first trip to Kenya was in January of 1984. It was my first trip ever on an airplane. My first flight on an airplane
was to Kenya.
I had never been on a mission trip. They didn't have them. I'd never been on an airplane, never flew on one. And so my wife and I were married about 18 months at that time. We had our first daughter, who was 10 weeks old. So we took our first grandchild from both our mother's side and our father's side and went on an airplane and went to Kenya. And then went and worked with an unreached people group known as the Pokot. Built my first mud hut. I worked as a carpenter, put myself through college working, building, framing homes.
Okay.
And so built a mud hut, and that's what we lived in, and learned our first language out in the middle of the bush, literally, in northwestern Kenya.
Wow. What do you eat over there?
Well, they ate everything from sour milk and ground corn mush called ugali, which I kind of like. It's sort of like mashed potatoes. The milk was soured. It was called missionary. And so you had, it tastes really very much to me like you're having milk and an Oreo cookie. You had the sour milk and the corn mush called ugali together.
I'll stick with the Oreo.
Really? Can't convince you to go otherwise?
I'm all in the double stuff.
And then I love double stuff. But termites also, those were a real delicacy.
I've heard that before.
Yes, yeah. And my wife is a nurse, and so we would have to treat during the rainy season. The termites would come up out of the hills, and people would just gorge themselves with the termites, and they would get all this gassiness in their tummies because they had just overloaded on all the protein from these termites.
Termites can't be that big.
No, they're about the size of, I don't know,
so
like little grasshoppers.
All right, now I'm really fascinated by this.
Okay.
How do you prepare a termite? You just eat it live?
Some people would. We preferred that they were kind of sun-dried with a little salt on them.
You ever have a moment now, many years removed, where you think, boy, I could go for some termites?
Not so much the termites. Now, the sour milk and the ugali, definitely.
Really?
People know I go back to Kenya, about once or every 2 years maybe, and they definitely have some food ready for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so work with Kenya, and then you decide to work with Good News Productions, which is GNPI, Good News Productions International.
Right.
So tell me about that journey and what Good News Productions does.
Yeah, so GNPI, or Good News Productions International, was actually founded by my father-in-law, a guy by the name of Zaiden Nutt, who I think you said you know a little bit of him, unique first name. He was a missionary in what is now known as Zimbabwe. So in those days, it was Rhodesia. And he was taking film strips from the U.S. market. They were called Jewel Miller film strips. It's what preacher boys used in those days to go house to house calling and sharing the gospel with people in America. So that's all he had in terms of a media tool.
Wow.
And so he used what he knew about, and he showed it to Africans. Now, when they showed it, the African questions, however, were very intriguing, because instead of asking questions of this new young missionary about God, about Jesus, the church, salvation, the questions from their hands being popped up were more about, why are American men so rude to their wives? Why do you drive on the wrong side of the road? How can you worship the Great Spirit in a very cavernous, cold building? So the questions were all about culture, not about Christ.
Interesting.
So he stopped using the media. The media drew people. It was a novelty, but it wasn't communicating. They had to unlearn a lot of cultural things because they were all happening in the U.S. culture, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So he stopped. And one day, the very first convert that he brought to Christ, a Zimbabwean by the name of Michael Nyandoro, was asking this young missionary, Zaiden, my father-in-law, where's those film strips at? And he said, well, Michael, you were there. You heard the questions. They were not about Christ.
Right.
They were having to be unlearned with all these cultural things before we could ever get to the Jesus of the Bible. And he said, but it drew a lot of people. And the missionary said, my father-in-law, but it didn't connect. But it drew a lot of people. And eventually, God spoke into existence GNPI's philosophy with this African brother who said these words, well then, let's just make our own. And with that sentence, well then, let's make our own, he blended the power of the visual with the power of being culturally relevant and making it in your own language, with your own people as the actors, doing things in your own context and culture. And that, in the 60s, was the birth of GNPI.
I would imagine at the time, that was pretty radical.
Incredibly so.
Now we look at it and go, oh, okay, yeah, we've seen Jesus films, we've seen The Chosen, those kind of things. But to put it in their context, to use that kind of technology, that must have really resonated over there.
It did, and my father-in-law is very humble, but in the 14 and a half years that they were there, they had over 11,000 follow Christ.
Wow.
A very effective ministry. And then as they were doing that, missionaries in neighboring Zambia, in neighboring South Africa were saying, hey, we would love for you to help make, in those days, films and film strips in the 60s and 70s in our languages for our people in these places as well, because it's so effective. So then later on, when they had to come off the field because of a medical concern for their third child, Linda, Zaiden shared with the trustees at Ozark Christian College this aha moment that he had in the effective ministry that was working there in Zimbabwe. He said, I really think somebody ought to take this over and really make it a larger ministry. And the trustees there at Ozark said, sort of like, Zidon, you are the man like Joseph who had the dream and interpreting it. You're the one who had the vision. You're the one with the experience. Oh, no, we're not going to let you just give this to somebody else or let it die. You need to do this. And so much so that, to the credit of the trustees at Ozark, they gave on a very, very meager amount of money and sold to Zidon and to Good News Productions International 27 acres upon which we have our campus today.
I have been to that campus. It's
Yeah.
beautiful, right
It
across the creek, where in old tradition, when a guy got engaged, he would be thrown into the creek
That's
as a
right.
rite of passage. They've since outlawed that, but unfortunately, I got to participate in that. So, all right, tell me about this. Good News Productions, you're entering into this initiative. You've been in this initiative, GNPI's Mission 15 project. Tell us about that.
For almost half a century, GNPI has been creating media and sharing Jesus. From solar kits to social media, the gospel message has been on the move around the world. Because of people like you, the ministry is now 27 teams strong in 16 countries. And with the inauguration of Nomad Academy, a new generation of media makers receive training to create media and share the good news. In India, Hindi Church Online reaches hundreds of thousands of viewers per week. Projects like The Global Gospel and Amazing Stories connect with children and adults alike in their own heart languages. In fact, GNPI teams engaged over 66 million with the good news last year. But with billions still waiting, we must do more. So, where do we go from here? Mission 15. This movement will send 1 billion gospel invitations by the end of 2030. It's going to take all of us to reach this goal. What can you do? It's easy. Simply pray, share, and give. You can pray for 15 minutes that people around the world will hear the good news. You can share your faith 15 times with others. Invite them to your small group or church. You can give $15 one time or monthly. With every $15 given, 450 gospel invitations will go out. Just imagine the impact you could have over a year when you pray, share, and give. By the power of the Holy Spirit and your partnership, we at GNPI believe this audacious goal is attainable, to send 1 billion invitations to follow Jesus by the end of 2030. Will you join the movement?
Right. Well, GNPI, our main thing is creating media to share Jesus. That's what we want to do. And as you heard earlier, I'm the son of a farmer, so I love the fact that the metaphor Jesus uses sometimes is that it's the gospel's a seed.
Right.
And unless that seed dies, but it has to be broadcast, it has to be spread. And so media is a way that we see today that we can spread the gospel seed in a pre-evangelistic way, going into nations and going into cultures that really Americans can't get into. And so I tell people all the time that we can be your ambassadors, going and sharing the gospel in languages you'll never learn. Going into countries you'll never get permission to travel into. And so we can do that with the click of a button on someone's phone. And so Mission 15 is this audacious vision that we have, that we felt God has given us and the board of directors to share and to plant 1 billion, with a B, 1 billion gospel invitations before 2030 is up. And so we're on course. We have done this last year. We launched it. We got about 51 million gospel invitations delivered already. And we have
wait just a second. 51 million already?
Oh, yeah.
That's
Yeah.
incredible.
I know, and that's great news, but to give people an idea, that's only 5% of the total.
Right.
I give the metaphor a lot of times that when the difference between 1 million and 1 billion is really hard for us to imagine.
Right.
And so 1 million-second-old baby is a child that's only 11 days old.
Right.
That child has to grow to be 31 years old to be 1 billion seconds old. And we're going after the 1 billion number. And so we do have 51 million gospel invitations delivered, but that's only 5% of the billion number.
Of course, yeah.
And yet we have 1 million people, Rusty, that have said, we want to take a next step, which meant after they listened to that digital information about Jesus in their language. They either clicked on another video to want to know more about Jesus in their language, a longer video. They downloaded a New Testament. They chatted with someone who was a disciple maker in their own language online, or they actually arranged for a coffee conversation or a tea conversation, whatever the case may be, there in their locale. And these are happening among Buddhists, among Hindus, and Muslims. Those are religions I have a really difficult time understanding their worldview. And so we use people who used to be in those world religions as the counselors, as the cultural consultants in leading them to Jesus. So I'm excited.
Oh, that's incredible. Okay, so the neat thing about what GNPI does is they use visuals to communicate this rather than just a talking head or just audio or those kind of things. Why is that so important? What's the benefit of the visual?
Yeah. So I give the illustration this way, that if we just preach on Sunday morning, by the time we have lunch, people are going to be hard-pressed to remember, and you're a great preacher, but they're going to be hard-pressed to remember 10% of what you said. And we spend 20 and 30 hours presenting and preparing for that 30-minute presentation. Now, if I can visually illustrate as I'm sharing, I move from a ability to remember now 20% all the way up to 50 and 60% when I hear and see simultaneously.
Wow.
Therefore, that's why video is so powerful. Now, if you don't think visuals are powerful in and of themselves, when we're zooming down 360, going speed limits or faster, we got maybe 1,001, 1,002, and that billboard is been passed by it. But people still feel that it's still effective. Those 2 seconds, even as a visual, sitting on the side of a road to communicate a new car, considering buying a piece of furniture or whatever the case may be. So hearing something, 10% memory. Just seeing it with no audio, 20% memory. Hearing and seeing critically together, we put this, there's a synergy, and we get up to 50 and 60% memory.
Wow. So it'd be more effective, instead of me writing and teaching a message, for me just to film a video of me performing what I read in the scriptures. What kind of a one-man show?
Well, going ahead but illustrating all the time what it is, the points that they're wanting to hear as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, because long after the points have been made, what do we remember? We remember the stories, right? And that's exactly what visuals do. Well, I love what you guys are doing. I love this mission that you guys are on. And tell us a little bit about kind of the global mission funding and how it goes to evangelize, and just, there are 3.4 billion people and all of that. Just how does this work out just economically?
Yeah. So we really feel that media not only is effective for the reasons we talked about as far as visual, and efficient in the fact that it can get into countries where we can't go as American communicators of the gospel lots of times, but we can do it for just parts of a penny per gospel invitation. And so right now we are doing and are able to deliver around 450 gospel invitations for every $15 that you give. And so that's so effective and efficient. I used to be a missionary, and I understand that the mission endeavor is just to get someone spun up and going is going to be $100,000 to $150,000 just to get them on the field, much less than the American salary of between $50,000 and $75,000 a year to supply that person's needs.
Wow.
But I can, with working with a videographer who gets $300 a month in India, create content that's Indian in their language, understands the nuances of their culture, understands the world religion of Hinduism, and I can deliver it on their phone at 2 a.m. when they've gotten the news about cancer, or they got their news about being unemployed, whatever the issue is. And I can then have that just sitting there, and they can scroll, and they can then begin to come across, God does see me. He does hear me. He's real. I want to check this out more. And now we have a beginning. of a conversation. And so we are just excited about the fact that in today's world, media, we can redeem media for a useful tool. And I really believe God gave media to the church first and foremost to use it for his purposes and not for Satan to use it for his purposes, say in gambling or pornography or just wasting time, scrolling. We really believe at GNPI, it is something that can be something to really plant a lot of effective gospel seed in the hearts of many, many people.
That's amazing. Okay, so I know that our listeners and viewers right now are thinking, I could be part of that. I could give $15. I could give $1,500. Tell us how they can do that. How do they partner with what GNPI is doing?
Yeah, the old adage is, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
Right.
This is an elephant, right? 1 billion gospel invitations to be delivered by 2030. And we're saying with Mission 15, the branding and the name of that comes from really at an individual level, we're inviting people to just do three things. Number one is, would you pray in this covenant relationship of Mission 15, if you're going to join, 15 minutes a week for lostness. Your lost neighbor around the corner, a lost family member, somebody you can put a name and a face with. And then moving in that same 15 minutes to the nations. So we say neighbors and nations, 15 minutes a week. 15 minutes a week, not a big ask, is it? To pray for lostness, not about someone who has cancer, needs healing, not about our election process, that's an issue, but about lostness of people.
Right.
15 minutes a week. Number two, would you promise in this covenant relationship to share your faith 15 times between now and 2030? That's twice a year. Tell somebody at the checkout counter. Tell somebody on the bench at the football game. About your faith in Jesus. Twice a year, 15. And then finally, giving the $15 a month, if you so inclined, to help us make that media content, those seeds, if you will, in those other languages. And so that 15 minutes a week, followed by 15 shares of the gospel in 7-year period, followed by the $15. And we have hundreds of people who've already signed up. And they are the backbone of the Mission 15 endeavor of helping us deliver those 1 billion gospel invitations.
That's amazing. That's really good strategy there.
Well, and 2 of the 3 fit in the rhythm of any church.
Right.
And you would want any church.
Christian, right.
Yeah. You want any member of any church to be one who prays for lost neighbors. You want anybody to be willing to share their faith if called upon and given an opportunity to. So those 2 come right in line. And then every church that has a mission strategy, has a mission department, this just fills and flows right into that. And we're so appreciative of, churches like Crossroads that support this endeavor as well.
Yeah. Well, I know that it's always needing more. And more than that, I think about the things that my wife and I have sponsored over the years, and kids we've sponsored and projects that we've helped fund and all that. It's a tremendous honor to be part of that. You're out there doing the heavy lifting, but we get a chance to kind of slap our sticker on the race car, so to speak, and say, hey, we're in on that and praying for you and what you're doing and the incredible work you're a part of. So I'm so grateful.
Thank you. I know that even more than us, it's the nationals, Russ. That's what you mean. But we work in Ukraine. We lost $1 million office there when Putin invaded 7 years ago, the first time. But it's not stopped our 15 members there. And they're saying during the war there in Ukraine, people are open like never before. In Myanmar, there's war. It's been in its 4th year now. We hardly hear about it in our country, and yet the people are very open right now to the gospel. It's tough. It's hard. Northern India, Ajay Lal and others there doing a fabulous work. We work with Ajay, have a Hindi church online, which we put there starting at COVID, and we're averaging 600,000 devices every Sunday, just devices. We can measure devices. We can't measure whether there's 2 people per device, 1 person per device, 5 people per device.
Right.
We're easily running 1 million people a Sunday in northern India with the gospel in just that one project. And we do well over 2,000 media projects a year.
Amazing. Well, I know you're going to want to be a part of this. What's your website?
GNPI.org.
Perfect. GNPI.org. Go to the website, sponsor now. $15, a great place to start. Goodness, that's a latte now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you just give up on that pumpkin spice latte one time a month, and you're going to help change many, many lives. Man, this has been an honor. I've heard your name for years, but never had a chance to officially meet you, sit down with you. My mom speaks so highly of you because you're part of her church.
Good to meet you.
But to be able to hear what you're doing, this is fantastic. So thank you so much, Mike.
Thank you very much.
Well, that was incredible. I hope you're as blessed by that as I was. Cannot wait to be partnered and continue to partner as a church with Mission15.global and GNPI.org. Hey, if this conversation helped you in any way, encouraged you, inspired you, pass this along to a friend. And as always, rate and review the podcast. If you're not watching us on YouTube, you're missing out. You can actually see some incredible swag that is on our podcast table. And unfortunately, the Rangers stuff is growing. So send in your stuff. We'll put it on the table. We'd love to have you be a part of what's going on around here. And we'd love to have you go to Greece with us. So text the word Greece to 55757 and take the second missionary journey of Paul. It's going to be a lot of fun. You get to go with me and my wife and many others from around not only Crossroads, but around the world. Love to have you join us, and we will talk to you next time. As always, keep it simple.
The guy, Gary Reed, was the reason. He said, have you ever thought about going? I think you'd make a good preacher. I said, no, I used to stutter, Gary, and I'm afraid of people. And he said, no, I think you'd do a good job. So he brought me to Ozark for, I don't know what they were called then. It was like First Tuesdays or something, and went to classes and had lunch and met a professor or two. And
what year was that?
So I went there. I got married in 81.
Okay.
So in 1980 is when I went to tour.
Okay.
And then in the spring, in the fall of 80, I went to school. Then in 81, I got married, stepped out of school because my wife had already gone to Ozark. My wife is a trustee at Ozark. Her name is Carolyn Schrage.
Yes, I know the name.
She got 2 years as an associate and then went on for nursing over at Fort Hays State University.
Okay.
You probably know that, being Wichita.
Absolutely.
So they were the only ones that had any kind of collaborative co-op program with Ozark in those days.
Okay.
So she didn't have to take such a hit.
Fort Hays did.
Fort Hays did because Seth Wilson had a relationship with a guy by the name of Sam Hamilton. Seth and Sam went to school at Cincinnati together, and Sam established the whole program, both of the psychology department and others over there at Fort Hays, and they so respected him that when he kind of said, if you ever get students from some of these Bible colleges, we need to give them as much credit as they can in their other various disciplines, whether they want to be a teacher or a nurse or clinical psychologist or whatever. Right. And so the college took Sam Hamilton's advice, and whenever people came from Boise or from Ozark or from Cincinnati or whatever, they had a special dispensation of having people look at their credits and giving them more credit for their credits, even though they were Christian Bible college kind of scenarios. If that makes sense. Yeah. So that was because of Seth and Sam Hamilton. So
who would have thought Seth was so progressive?
I know. So what years did you?
I was there from 89 to 94.
Okay. So I would have been, I went in 84 to Kenya. So we were already in Kenya. So
you might have been there with Mike Hughes or maybe Dudley Rutherford, any of those guys.
Yeah.
David
so
Rutherford.
Carolyn, my wife, and Dudley got the what's it called, the Seth Wilson Outstanding Alumni Award.
Yeah.
So technically, I did not graduate from Ozark. I attended Ozark.
Okay.
But went to the mission field. I already had one degree.
Okay.
I had a degree in animal physiology, pre-vet.
Yeah.
So I had a pre-vet degree. So I wasn't after the degree per se. I was after just Life of Christ training and cross-cultural mission training.
Wow.
So I really didn't go for the degree. I went for the classes.
Yeah, the education.
So they couldn't, quote, give me a
right.
outstanding, because I understand it, because technically I never graduated from Ozark. So I said, well, but it is interesting. I preach in your chapels, I teach in your classes, and I've mentored one or two of your teachers.
Yeah, and you take credit for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the way. So you would have had Seth Wilson.
Yep.
Did you have Don DeWelt?
I did.
Wow. Man, that's...
Wilbur Fields.
Oh, yeah, I had Wilbur. I had Wilbur in the latter days.
Staten.
Oh, wow.
Lynn Gardner.
Yeah, I had Lynn. That was great.
Kenny Bowles.
Yep, I had Kenny.
Tony Newby.
I had Tony. Was Mark Scott there? He might
I did
been
not
there yet.
have him, no.
And was Ken the president?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Fellas, are we ready?
We've been recording this whole time.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's what they do.
We do with old people.
Yeah.
We just go down memory lane.
That's
here,
right. We're about ready to start talking about the weather.
It's all right. I'm going to send this to Randa when you talk about Gary. So she'll like that.
Yeah. Randa volunteers for us at GNPI.
Really?
Yeah, we love Randa. She is
They're great.
so dear to our hearts.
He was so funny, too.
He was. Yeah. He's the one that a saying I always said when you eat something really nice. And I say, yeah, there's a preacher one time that would just say, that was good enough to wrap a lip around.
Wow. Okay.
Baptist church, he was always upset that my mom became a Baptist. So when he found out I was coming to Crossroads Christian, he goes, oh, you're extra safe. And just
That's good.